Did you ring the bell? I didn't hear it. You have me. Okay, anyway, we're about to begin. So good morning, everyone. This is the last day of 2024. Isn't that incredible? Time just goes so quickly. So I thought that this morning, after we do the prayers, I'll lead a little meditation on Tonglen, taking and giving. And there's one version of that that's quite simple and very practical. It's something you can use whenever you're experiencing a problem, any kind of problem. And so it's kind of a helpful kind of first step into this practice. So let's start with the prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one that's gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one not of bliss, nor the world's supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure body's form supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, kinda like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path of freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash, a lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a woodland and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
So take a few moments to renew your altruistic intention, wanting to help others as much as you can, and have that as your reason, your motivation for being here. Okay, so now for the meditation. Bring to mind a problem that you have. Maybe better not to think of your biggest problem. Think of something relatively small, like some physical discomfort or pain or illness, or some emotional problem, something you were worried about, unhappy about. And when you bring this problem to your mind, notice if your mind has resistance, like thinking, I don't like this, I don't want this, I want it to go away. And now think that you're not the only person in the world that has such a problem. Other people have the same problem or something similar. And think of one person. It could be somebody you know or you've heard about, or you could just use your imagination. Imagine some other person who has the same kind of problem. And once you have thought of such a person, imagine them in front of you. And looking at that person, think, just as I don't like this problem and I wish to be free of this problem, so does this person. really try to empathize with their suffering. And see if you can turn that into compassion, which is wishing them to be free of this suffering. If it's hard to really feel that, you can just say some words to yourself like, how nice it would be if this person could be free from this suffering, this problem. Then based on that, see if you can change your attitude about your own problem. And instead of resisting it, trying to push it away, wanting to be free of it, see if you can accept this problem. Make that decision. I will accept and experience this problem, this suffering. And by doing that, may this other person be free of their share of this problem. So, in other words, you're sort of saying to yourself, by my experiencing the problem that I have, may that person be free of theirs. And if you're courageous enough, you could go further and think, may all other people, all other beings be free of this problem. And then that's the taking part of the practice. And then for the giving part of the practice, you generate a feeling of loving kindness, wishing that other person and other beings to be happy, to have happiness. How nice it would be if this person could be happy, could have good experiences. And then think of all your good karma, your virtue, your good qualities, your good fortune, your own happiness, and imagine that in the form of light, bright rays of light going from your heart to this other person. And it turns into whatever they need to be happy, starting with simple, ordinary things like good health, good food, all the necessities of life. And on top of that, the inner qualities they need to be happy, and to be able to manage their problems with a calm, balanced state of mind. And you can also wish that they will meet with spiritual teachers, spiritual teachings, and start traveling on the path that leads to yet higher states of happiness, up to the highest happiness of enlightenment. So I like this practice because it's kind of simple, and when you have practiced it for a while, you get used to it, then you can also use it in your daily life. Like when you encounter some problem, you stub your toe, you nick your finger, you get stuck in a traffic jam. You can think, okay, here's this situation, it's not nice, it's not pleasant, but I'm not the only person in the world that has this kind of problem. Lots of other people do as well. And then just think, okay, by my experiencing this problem, may everyone else be free of that same kind of problem that they have. So you can do it just within a couple of, less than a minute if you're familiar with it. And it may not change the actual situation, but it changes your mind. And when our mind can change, our way of thinking and feeling and looking at things can change and be more positive, then it can cease to be a problem. It's like, okay, there's this situation, but let's make the best of it. And it is like getting more familiar with this practice of Tonglen, taking and giving. And then the more familiar we get with this way of doing it, we can have the courage to go further and actually take on the suffering of others. And when we do Tonglen with a problem, it doesn't mean we can't try to find a solution to the problem. Yeah. So if you're sick, for example, you don't have to just sit there and do Tonglen. You can go to the doctor and get medicine. That's fine. But there aren't always antidotes to every problem. Some illnesses or injuries can't be cured, or even if there is medicine or remedies, it may take a while before it's cured. You might have that problem for a while in your life. So in the meantime, while you're on the way to recovery, this is something you can do with your mind to transform that situation instead of grumbling, complaining, like we were talking about yesterday, feeling sad. Here they have an expression, having a pity party. That was a new one for me, but yeah, I can relate to it. Those kind of thoughts and attitudes aren't very helpful. And in fact, they just sort of make things worse, because on top of this problem, the way your mind is working just adds more layers of problem to it. And yeah, it doesn't really do any good. So this is something we can do that does help our mind at least. And if our mind improves, that could also help the situation to improve. Yeah, they do say there's a connection between mind and body. And so if our mind can be more positive, have more positive thoughts and feelings and experiences, that can really help with healing our physical ailments. And it just makes the whole experience nicer instead of horrible. Okay, so I was thinking last night that, yeah, maybe for some of you, I think are relatively new to Buddhism, or maybe you're familiar with other traditions of Buddhism, but new to Tibetan Buddhism. And so maybe many of the things I've been talking about, and we've been looking at in this very short retreat, are kind of overwhelming and difficult to accept, challenging to accept. And I think that's normal. I'm sure if you talk to any of us who are wearing these clothes, they'll tell you that, yeah, we had a hard time in the beginning too. You know, we kind of put our toe in and then ran away, and then we came back, tried again, ran away. And so probably took years of, you know, learning and thinking about and reflecting on and working through a lot of doubts and questions to get to the point where we were ready to jump in. So that's really normal, I think, for most people. So don't, you know, feel bad, don't feel worried, don't feel like worthless or hopeless, like there's something wrong with me. Everybody else is fully accepting of these ideas. I'm the only one who's having trouble. I'm sure that's not true. So we all go through, you know, years of working on this material. And also one thing I've heard my teachers say that I've found really helpful. They said that you don't have to accept everything and do everything that's part of Buddhism. And instead, you can be like somebody who goes shopping, like in a big department store, supermarket. There's so many things to buy, but you don't have to buy everything, right? You usually go in with your list and you just take a few items and you leave. And then it's similar with the Dharma, with Buddhism. You know, you don't have to believe everything and do everything and practice everything. So you can hopefully find at least one or two or three aspects of the Buddhist teachings and practices that you feel, yeah, this would be good for me. I'd like to bring this into my life and use this in my life. Yeah, so that's completely fine. You can leave the rest for other people. You don't deprecate those other things, because even if you think this is crazy and it's not for me, but somebody else would feel this is perfect just for me. And so it's good to have a respectful attitude towards aspects that you can't relate to. Yeah, don't put them down, and appreciate that they're useful for other people, but just say, that's not for me. And then the things that you feel comfortable with, you feel happy about, you feel, yeah, this would be good for me, then take those and use those. And also our attitude might change, you know, in the beginning we might feel, you know, towards something, but later, yeah, we feel, oh yeah. I remember one time when I'd spent a number of years in India and sometimes teaching courses and leading retreats there. And one time I was leading a retreat in one center there, and one woman who came to the retreat told me that, yeah, I think she'd been to a few courses, and she said she really had trouble with prostration. She didn't like doing prostrations. But unfortunately, that was part of the retreat that we were going to be doing, long, full-length prostrations. She said, okay, I'll give it a try. And then at the end of the retreat, she said, actually, she really enjoyed it. She you know, tried doing them and found them really nice. And even so her mind completely changed, and She found something enjoyable and meaningful about doing prostrations. So that can happen, things that we can't relate to in the beginning and we feel averse to and resistant to, our mind can turn around completely. That may not happen, which is okay too. You may never get around to wanting to do that particular practice or accept that particular idea. But at least, if you can find some aspects of the teachings and practice that you do find useful and meaningful, that you'd like to take home with you, then that's great. There were a couple of questions from yesterday. One is, in order for karma to ripen, often bad actors show up and are involved. Are those humans creating bad karma for themselves when they are an instrument serving my ripe karma? Aren't they my supreme teacher? Yeah, there is that idea in Buddhism that a person that, harms us, or we just find them really annoying, they seem to be just creating problems for us, that person is like a teacher. And they do use that term, supreme teacher. Mainly for patience, that mainly comes in the context of patience or fortitude, because that is it's a really important practice, both for those on the Bodhisattva path to enlightenment, but also on the path to nirvana. Yeah, if we want to attain either of those two goals, we have to learn how to manage our anger, and not just manage it, but overcome it, be free of it. Anger has to be out of the way. And it is definitely possible, although it does take time. And so patience is like the opposite of anger. Patience is learning how to put up with difficult people, difficult situations without, getting angry, or, at least being able to keep our anger to ourselves and not acting it out. And so there's lots of wonderful, wonderful tools or methods for doing that, learning how to manage our anger. And there's one text sometimes it's called a Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or Entering the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, by an Indian master, Shantideva, who lived, 8th century, something like that. And one whole chapter of that book is on patience, how to learn to manage anger, and it's just full of wonderful methods. So yeah, that book, but also many other sources within Buddhism have these ideas, these practices we can do to manage anger. So this is one of the ideas, is to really think how important it is to learn patience, how patience is really, really precious. And we all do have patience to a certain extent. We can put up with certain difficulties, difficult people, difficult situations, but we also have a limit to our patience, right? And so it's we can remain patient this far, but then we lose it and fall into anger. But we can work on that and extend the limits of our patience further and further and further, and learn to be able to stay patient in more and more difficult situations. And to be able to do that, we need help. We need difficult people who sort of challenge our patience, because otherwise we might kind of think, oh, I'm such a patient person, I don't have much anger, I've overcome my anger, I don't get angry anymore. That's easy to do in a situation where everybody's really nice and sweet and well behaved, easy to think that you're really patient. But then one day, somebody does something, says something, and anger explodes. Well, that's a really good opportunity to recognize that you're not as patient as you thought you were, and you still have anger that you need to work on. So in that way, that person is like a teacher, giving you the chance to recognize that, giving you the opportunity to, extend the limits of your patience. So that's the idea behind saying, such a person is a supreme teacher. Because, if you're always with people who are nice and sweet, well behaved, don't hurt you, don't do things that irritate you, then you don't have so many opportunities to work on your patience. But so that's one part. But then this question says, are they creating bad karma? And that's actually something Shantideva addresses. I'm teaching a class on that text, and we just went through that section. And he says, because he kind of, sometimes he'll bring in these hypothetical questions that people might ask and then answers them himself. So that was one of the hypothetical questions, like, okay, so if somebody, irritates me or beats me up or whatever, and that gives me the chance to practice patience, then aren't they doing a good thing? Aren't they creating good karma by doing that? And he says, mm-mm. I mean, of course, it depends on their motivation, but most of those situations, their motivation is anger, hatred, deluded. So they've got, if that's the case, if they are afflicted and they have a bad motivation for what they're doing, then they are creating bad karma, even though this is an opportunity for us to create good karma and increase our patience. But that doesn't make their karma any better. And so he's pointing that out so that we have compassion for that person, because he actually makes that point. He says, we come out, if we practice patience in this situation, we benefit. We're getting, this is good for us, this situation, because we can practice patience, create virtue, purify our bad karma. This is really good for us, but it's not good for that person, right? They're just acting in an afflicted way, creating bad karma. They're going to suffer as a result of that. And so then all the more reason to have compassion for this person instead of anger. Being angry at them just doesn't make any sense, considering the karma they're creating and the afflicted state of mind. I mean, when somebody does something harmful, they're not in a happy state of mind. They're not in a good state of mind. They're already in a suffering state of mind. There's already suffering there in their mind. And then by the way they're acting, they're creating even more suffering for themselves. So if we think about that, contemplate that, it makes total sense to have compassion for them and want to help them, want to reach out and help that person, instead of being angry and wanting to beat them up and give them more suffering. Yeah, does that make sense? I mean, sometimes it takes a while to think about these ideas, contemplate them, but that's the point that Shantideva makes. So yes, we see them as a teacher, but we also see that they deserve our compassion and our wish to help them. And if we can't go that far, if we're not able to feel compassion, then at least try not to be angry. That's what Shantideva says. If you can't have compassion for them, at least don't be angry at them and hate them and want them to suffer. At least try to avoid that. And then there was another question asking if I could elaborate on what uncontaminated karma is. So I think it's better if we start talking about the next of the three principal aspects of the path, and the more we understand that, the more then this point about uncontaminated karma will be. So we didn't spend a lot of time on the second principal aspect of the path, Bodhichitta. But we're kind of running out of time. There's still quite a few verses to go, so I would like to finish. And of course, bodhicitta has been talked about, and the motivations and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the full meaning of bodhicitta is really huge, really enormous, because it takes into account, past lives. We've had all these lifetimes before this one, and we've had connection with all other beings. They've been our mother, they've been our father, and so on. They've been kind, they've provided us with food and clothes and shelter and medicine and, all the fun we've ever had, all the good things we've ever had, are dependent on others. And we also depend on others to be able to follow the path to enlightenment, like we just looked at with patience, to be able to practice patience. We need difficult people to be able to practice giving. We need people who need things, so that we can give to. To be able to practice ethics, we need sentient beings we could harm, but we choose not to. So if we were like the only person on the planet, all by ourselves, no other person, no other being, we wouldn't be able to cultivate the love and the compassion and the other qualities we need, and of course bodhicitta, to become enlightened. So in fact, there's no spiritual progress and no enlightenment without sentient beings. So we do depend on them. They are important for us. But yeah, anyway, there's these huge ideas in Buddhism about so many sentient beings, and we've had these connections with them in past lives. We will have connections with them in future lives. They are important for us, beneficial for us. And therefore, it just makes total sense that we don't turn our backs on them and just take care of our own needs and wishes and free ourselves from suffering and not care about them. That makes sense that we incorporate them in our spiritual practice, in the sense of, I want to help all of them. The best way I can do that is to become a Buddha, to become enlightened. So that's what's involved in bodhicitta. So there's a lot of ideas there that are new to us when we first meet Buddhism, and it's like, it takes a while to think about them, contemplate them, and make sense of them. So yeah. But if it's difficult to accept all those ideas and really feel bodhicitta, there may be some aspects of that state of mind that you can relate to, just like loving kindness, learning to be more kind to others and helpful to others in your life. It's hard to imagine anyone saying, no, I don't want to do that. Because it's good for us. And there's research on the benefits that we experience when we are kind to others. It's good for your health. It helps you to have a longer life, a happier state of mind, less stress. I mean, there's all these benefits that we experience by being more kind to others. So even if you don't care about them, if you care about yourself, it's good for you. But I think we all do care about others. It's just a question of, cultivating that state of mind more and more and making it more a part of your life. So I think, that's something I'm sure everybody can relate to and want to do more of. And there are a lot of ideas in Buddhism and practices in Buddhism that can help you to do that. And so there's one book, what's it called? An Open-Hearted Life, co-authored by Venerable Thupten Chodron, the abbess of the Abbey, and Russell Colts, who's a psychologist, and his speciality is a type of therapy called, what is it called? Compassion-focused therapy. Beautiful. So it's a really nice book. It's in the little book nook downstairs. It has lots of little short chapters, so you could take one chapter a day, read it, contemplate it, try to incorporate it in your life. And some of it's more from the point of Buddhism, some more from the point of Western psychology, but all of it is like, this makes so much sense. I can't really argue with this. And it just gives a lot of very practical ideas on how you can be more kind and compassionate in your life, and how good it is for you and also everybody around you. So I really recommend that book, and a good starting place. And then Open Heart, Clear Mind is also good. A lot of very practical advice in there, and also an explanation of some of these hard topics in Buddhism that, it's more clear and simple to understand. Okay, so let's move on to the third of the principal aspects of the path. So this is on page 32, 1, 2, 3, fourth one down, fourth verse down. Okay, so it says, even if you meditate upon the determination to be free and the altruistic intention, those are the first two principal aspects of the path. Without the wisdom realizing the ultimate nature, you cannot cut the root of cyclic existence. Therefore, strive for the means to realize dependent arising. So this third principal aspect of the path is sometimes called the correct view, but it really refers to the view that correctly understands how things exist, the ultimate nature of things, the reality of things, the true way that everything exists. And so we also use the term emptiness to refer to this emptiness, and another term that's sometimes used is selflessness, emptiness and selflessness. You encounter those terms when you're reading Buddhist texts. And this is a really important aspect of the Buddha's teachings, but it's also very difficult. Just to give you an idea, this series of books, the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, that Venerable Choden has been working on for I don't know how many years now, taking teachings, the Dalai Lama's teachings, but also material from other sources, the Pali sources, Chinese sources, and it's kind of like an encyclopedia, but it's basically the path to enlightenment. It's like an extended version of the Lam Rim, the path to enlightenment, for contemporary audiences. And so within that series, there's 10 volumes, and 3 of those volumes, number 7, 8, and 9, are on this topic. And these are thick books. They're like this. And so this is not an easy topic that we can learn just in a couple of hours or days or even months or years. It's a big topic, and there's lots of different aspects that we need to learn and understand. So if you're really new to this, hearing this for the first time, just don't expect you're going to make sense of it all. But every little bit that we learn, we hear, we read, it leaves seeds, it leaves imprints, and slowly, 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 things start to make sense. I remember my own experience when I first started learning Buddhism and I heard about this topic. I felt like they were talking Chinese or Russian or something. It's like I couldn't even understand the words they were using. The terminology was like, what? And it was really years. It took several years before I started getting a little inkling of what this was all about. And it was mainly due to one teacher, Khenso Jamba Tekchok, who was also Venerable's teacher. And he just had a wonderful way of making these complex ideas simple and clear, putting them in kind of practical terms. And I thought, finally, it was like, like a light bulb going off, Oh, I get it. That's what it's talking about. But still, it still takes years and years of study and thinking and meditating and discussing with people to start making sense of it. So now I can at least talk about emptiness, but I still have a long way to go in my understanding. So that just gives you some idea of, don't have high expectations. You're going to get it just like that. You might, but it is a tough one. And it's essential. Yeah, sometimes people get discouraged and think, oh, this is too hard, I can't do this. But if we really want to free ourselves from suffering once and for all, and if we really want to help others to be free of suffering once and for all, this is indispensable. We can't do without it. So however difficult it may be, we have to keep trying. So like it says in this verse, without the wisdom realizing the ultimate nature, you cannot cut the root of cyclic existence. So the root of cyclic existence, meaning, samsara, that whole situation that we are in and other beings are in, where we just experience dukkha, suffering again and again. So the root of this whole thing is ignorance. Ignorance about the true nature of things, how things really exist. And probably most people aren't even aware that they have such ignorance in their mind. I remember one time I'm giving a talk, and I talked about ignorance and how everybody has ignorance. And one man in the audience, he put up his hand and he said, "Excuse me, but I am not ignorant. I have 2 PhDs." So ignorance has nothing to do with our education, how much we've studied, how much we've learned. You could be a genius, you could be Einstein, but still have ignorance, because when we say Buddhism, in Buddhism, when we say ignorance, we're talking about something really deep in our mind. It's just a mistaken way of seeing everything, ourselves and others and everything that exists. And probably most people never question that. We have a sense, I am here, I exist, and I know who I am, I know how I am, I know my reality, and I know my father, my mother, my brother, my sister, my friend, my partner, my pet, my kids, my neighbors. I know all these people, and I know all these things. This is my house, this is my car, this is my phone, this is my computer. We just kind of assume that the way we see all of these things and experience all these things is how they are. Yeah, things exist the way I see them and the way I think they are. Most people probably never question that. I could be wrong about that. I remember once a woman saying that, she was just driving her car down the street one day, and she saw some people standing at a bus stop, and this thought came into her mind, how do I know those people are really there? Yeah. So, and I think many of us back in the 70s, and it's probably still the case now, you eat these little pills or you smoke this stuff, and that gets you to start wondering things. Well, Lama Yeshe said that's actually a good thing, to kind of throw you out of your normal way of seeing things and start questioning. Wow, I used to see things like that, and now I'm seeing things like this. Well, which one is right? Which one is reality? So that can be helpful to get started, but not to keep doing that. Get stuck on that. So this is what the Buddha is asking us, is to question, start questioning. our usual perception of things. Do I see things correctly? Or is the way I am seeing things true or not? Yeah. And emptiness, so the true nature of things, we use this term emptiness to refer to the actual way that things exist. And so that emptiness, and it means empty, it doesn't mean non-existence. Sometimes people get the wrong idea, because the word emptiness is a little tricky. It does kind of sound like nothingness, like things don't exist at all. And that's not the meaning. The meaning of emptiness is that things do exist, but they are empty of, or they lack a certain mode of existence, a certain way of existing that our mind sort of projects on them, but isn't actually there. Okay, so like what's recommended is that we start this investigation with our own self, our own sense of I, me, because that's the big problem, how we see ourselves. So we do exist, yeah? Each one of us, each person, we do exist. But we have certain notions about ourselves, how we exist, you know, the kind of person we are, that are actually not true, that are like fabrications, hallucinations, projections of our ignorant mind. And they're actually not true. They're not really there. So that's the meaning of emptiness. It's the absence of, or the lack of, mistaken, false fabrications about things that never existed, don't exist, never will exist. They're just like totally false, totally wrong. And it's helpful. There's a lot of analogies in the teachings that help us understand this. And one analogy that I really like is a mirage. Yeah, you probably all had that experience if you're in the desert, or even driving on a freeway or in a parking lot in the middle of summer when the sun is overhead and it's just super, super, super hot, and it's shining down on the surface, asphalt or sand or whatever, and you see this appearance, this shimmering, silvery appearance that looks like water. You could swear it was water. Remember, you have that experience? Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, you know, and on the parking lot, you'd see, it looked like there was a puddle of water there in the parking lot. But it's not. You get closer and it just totally vanishes. It's just completely dry, not a drop of water. So it's just an appearance due to these conditions, the sun, the surface, our eyes. So due to all those factors and causes and conditions, there's this appearance of water when in fact there's not a drop of water there. So that's a helpful analogy, you know, to the way we normally see things, where we feel like there's a real solid permanent I somewhere inside that's in charge of this whole show and making the decisions and getting angry at that person and getting excited about that person and so on and so forth. Seems like there's a real I there doing all those things. But if that was the case, then when we start investigating, looking more carefully, what is this I? How does it exist? It should become more and more clear. Just like that, you know, appearance of water. If there really was water there, the closer you get, the more clear it becomes. And you could even touch it and stick your toes in it. But, that, you know, disappears. So in a similar way, when we investigate this seemingly real, solid I that we feel, we think is there, then if we do it properly, it will disappear. It vanishes. Because it doesn't exist, it never did, it never will. It's like a mirage. But this isn't so easy. I mean, I'm making it sound easy, but it's not easy. There's a lot of steps we need to go through. And first is to get a correct understanding of emptiness, and that usually requires listening to teachings, reading books, discussing with other people to kind of get things right, thinking about it on our own, and meditating on it with as much concentration as possible. Because if your mind is scattered all over the place, you're thinking about coffee and who you're going to call when you go home and all these other things, you won't have the necessary focus to be able to really get to the heart of this. So where was I? Oh yeah, so they say emptiness is something very subtle. It's not something we can see with any of our senses. It's a subtle kind of phenomena, and the only way we can understand it is first with our mind, with our intellectual understanding, and then eventually with further practice and meditation, we can gain a direct realization, meaning our mind is able to directly see emptiness, not with our eyes, but with our mind. But to start with, because it's something kind of subtle, hidden, we need to use a reason. We always need to use some kind of logical reason to get the understanding of emptiness. And there's a number of different reasons that are explained in the traditional teachings, but it's said that the best reason is dependent arising, which is what he mentions here. Strive for the means to realize dependent arising. So I'm going to give a little explanation about dependent arising. It's very much part of Buddhist teachings. All traditions of Buddhist teachings talk about dependent arising. And it simply means that whatever exists depends on other things. Arises dependently, exists dependently. Nothing is independent. Nothing exists totally independently, all by itself. And why this is important is because the way in which we perceive things, like our false sense of I, as well as other people, other beings, phenomena, this mistaken way things appear and we tend to just buy into, it seems as if they exist independently, as if they stand alone, separate, cut off, not depending on anything else for their existence. That's this mistaken appearance that we have. And this is actually subtle, because somebody asks you, do you think you are independent? We would probably say, no. Do you think this cup is independent? No, it depended on the factory and the people who made it and so on. So that's up here, in our intellect, We can understand that things depend on other things. But here we're talking more about a gut level, intuitive, instinctive way that we perceive things and relate to them. It's on that level that things seem independently existing. And so independent existence is like another way of saying inherent existence. They usually talk about inherent existence or true existence, those kind of terms to refer to this false way that things appear. They appear inherently existing or truly existing. What does that mean? So it means they appear as if they exist independently, not depending on anything else. And that's why to contemplate dependent arising, the ways things exist dependently, is an antidote to seeing things as independently existing. And so they say there are 3 ways that things exist dependently. And by contemplating these, that won't immediately give us an understanding of emptiness, but at least it's helping us go in that direction. So the first way is the easiest way, and that's dependent on causes and conditions. And this applies only to impermanent phenomena. So in Buddhist philosophy, they divide phenomena, meaning whatever exists, in different categories. And one way of dividing things is into impermanent and permanent. And the meaning of impermanent is that it changes all the time. I think you did a meditation on impermanence already, yeah? So the meaning when they use this term impermanent in Buddhism, it means changing, subject to change. Changing, in fact, all the time. And impermanent things are also called conditioned phenomena or compounded phenomena. Those are other terms used in Buddhist philosophy. And conditioned means things that arise in dependence on other things, causes and conditions. So like our bodies are that kind of phenomena because they came into existence due to our mother and father contributing some part of their body, a sperm and an ovum. So those two came together in our mother's womb and then nourished by our mother's body. This body grew. And after we were born, we continued to eat food and drink water and breathe air and so on. So all of those causes and conditions were necessary for this body to exist. And so all material phenomena, all the physical things, the material things around us are that type of phenomena. They all arise from or come into existence in dependence on causes and conditions. Like this table, sometime in the past there was a tree, and the tree itself grew from a seed and water and so on and so forth. And then loggers came along, cut it down, brought it to a mill, it got sliced up, made into a table. Did you make this table, Sheldon, or was it? No. Will. Oh, okay, our friend Will made this table. Yeah. So then a nice carpenter came along and put the pieces together and made this table. So many different factors, many different causes and conditions. Yeah. So that's easy to understand. But it's something we may not always think about. But it is helpful to think about, just to see that, yeah, the table didn't always exist. Because when you first walk in this room and you see this table, you might have this feeling like, oh, it's been here forever. Almost like it's always existed, just like this. We don't see all the causes and conditions that went into this table coming into existence. But that's really helpful to sort of break down this sense of things being permanent and solid, as if they were always there. So that's, all impermanent phenomena have that characteristic, that feature of being dependent on causes and conditions. And that includes our mind too. Our mind, even though it's not something physical or material, but it also depends on causes and conditions. The mind is like a stream of different experiences arising and passing, arising and passing, arising and passing. So it's always changing, never the same from one moment to the next. And if we were to isolate one of those experiences, one of those mental states that happens in our mind, we can see that it arose due to causes and conditions. The main cause is the previous moment of mind. The moment of mind just before that one, that disappeared, but then transformed into the next one. And our mind also depends on things that we perceive. We see things, we hear things, we smell and taste and feel things in our body. And that information we take in through our senses, that's the content. Our thoughts, most of our thoughts are about things that we see and hear and smell and taste and so on. And so, phenomena, objects that we perceive are also conditions for our mind. And then Buddhism says there's other causes and conditions as well, like our karma and imprints from the past. So if we have a habit of being angry and critical, okay, so past experiences of being angry and critical, are there in our mind, imprints of those in our mind, and those can lead us to again have thoughts that are angry and critical. Or if we have a habit of being kind and compassionate, then imprints from past experiences of being kind and compassionate will help to give rise to further thoughts and feelings of being kind and compassionate. So previous experiences from this life and from past lives also are causes and conditions for whatever is happening in our mind at any given moment. So there's many different factors. And then of course conditioning, like our experiences in this life with our family and environment and school, teachers, friends. So many factors from many different directions affect our mind and determine what kind of thoughts and feelings we have. So our mind is also something impermanent and conditioned and dependent. Therefore, our mind is dependent, not independent. And then the second way that things are dependent is on parts, meaning they are made up of parts. And this applies to all things, both impermanent and permanent. We'll start with the impermanent because they're easier. So again, all the impermanent phenomena, like our bodies and the table and our minds and so on, they're all made up of parts. Everything has parts that make it up. And if the parts were not there, if the parts are taken away, then that object doesn't exist anymore. That's not too difficult to understand, right? When we're kids, we have Lego sets and Tinker toys and erector sets and all these, these things we put together and we take them apart. We build a castle and then we take it apart and build a tractor or whatever. So, yeah, things are made up of parts, and when you take away the parts, that object isn't there anymore, doesn't exist anymore. So that's also helpful to contemplate, to kind of break things down and see them as not so solid and permanent as they normally appear. So far, I've just talked about impermanent things, which are easier to understand, but Buddhism, or at least some aspects of Buddhist philosophy, talk about permanent phenomena as well, and that's more difficult. So permanent phenomena are things that don't arise from causes and conditions, don't change moment by moment, the usual example that they give of a permanent phenomena is uncompounded space, meaning the mere absence of obstruction and contact. So like space, yeah, just like empty space, isn't something impermanent. It doesn't arise from causes and conditions, and doesn't change moment by moment. It's just there. And it's important because it allows us to move. If there were no space, we couldn't move around. We couldn't do things. We couldn't move furniture into this room. And we couldn't move our bodies into this room and sit down. So space is there, but we just kind of take it for granted. But it does exist, and it's quite important and quite useful. And but it's permanent in this, rather than impermanent. It doesn't change moment by moment because there's nothing there to change. Things that change, like material things, there's atoms, there's particles, there's little bits of matter, and those are always moving and changing. They don't stay the same. But with space, It's not made up of particles and of matter that can change. So it's a different kind of phenomena. And it also isn't created or produced by causes and conditions. Kind of always there, even though things move in and out of it, but it itself doesn't change. This is hard to understand. I can't say I fully understand it, and yet I use space. I mean, we use space all the time. Yeah. And another example of a permanent phenomena is emptiness. So emptiness, this thing that we need to understand to be able to free ourselves and others from suffering, is also a permanent phenomena. And in fact, it's said to be like space. Yeah, space, if we can have a better understanding of space, we can have a better understanding of emptiness, although they're not exactly the same, but they are similar. In the sense that they're absences. Space is an absence. Okay, it's an absence of anything obstructing movement and contact. So emptiness is also an absence. It's an absence of false, mistaken ways of seeing things, perceiving things, conceiving things. So it's just an absence of those. And so, yeah, permanent things are more abstract. They're abstract rather than concrete, perceivable things. They're abstract things, and yet they do exist. They do exist because they can be known. We can know them. We can experience them. Let's see. Yeah, another example of a permanent phenomena is the third noble truth of the four truths. The third truth is called true cessations. And a true cessation is the absence of an affliction, or even just a portion of an affliction, such that it will never arise again. And that's not easy to understand, but we have anger, right? And we get angry sometimes, and it's not very pleasant. So we'd probably like to get rid of our anger. And that is definitely possible. The Buddha has done it. Others have done it. And so through practicing the path, and mainly by realizing emptiness, they were able to get to the point where anger was just totally gone from the mind and will never arise again. It's like just finished. Anger is finished in their mind. And that's an example of a true cessation. That's the meaning of true cessation. It's the absence of an affliction like anger, such that it will never arise again. So like in the Buddha's mind, Buddha never gets angry. He can remember being angry. Yeah, in his past, he knew that he got angry before. He can see other people getting angry. But in his mind, anger just never arises because he has completely wiped it out. He has eliminated all the causes and conditions that give rise to anger. So that's the meaning of a true cessation. It's the absence of an affliction, or even just a part of an affliction, that means that will never occur again in that particular person's mind. Okay? It exists in other people's minds, but in that person, it will never arise again. So that's also said to be a permanent phenomena, in the sense that it's like an absence. It's an absence of something. It used to be there, but isn't there anymore. So this is hard, and don't worry if you don't understand it. It's but just to know that there are things that are permanent, and permanent things also have parts. They depend on their parts, just like impermanent things do. But again, it's hard to understand the parts of permanent phenomena. But like with space, okay, if you can get some understanding of space, they say space has parts. Like we walk into a room, let's say, like the Buddha Hall, okay? Buddha Hall is mostly unfurnished right now, so you can walk into a room in the Buddha Hall and there's just all this space. And we can start planning, okay, we're going to put a table here, we're going to put an altar there, we're going to put a sink there, we're going to put something here. So we can sort of divide up the space, at least mentally, and think about what we're going to put there, different parts of the room. So space can be divided. And also globally, they divide up the space around countries, don't they? Like this is American space, and that's Canadian space, and that's Mexican space. And it sort of goes out to a certain extent into the ocean. Don't they do that? And you can't come into my space without permission. What was happening a couple of years ago? These Chinese weather balloons were coming into American space and they hadn't asked permission, and so they were shot down, something like that. So we do divide up space, right? And it's sometimes useful to do that. But it just shows that, yeah, there are parts of space. Space does have parts. And so space depends on parts. And emptiness also depends on parts. Because emptiness, we might think that emptiness is just this huge thing that exists everywhere. But in fact, emptiness is the true nature of each and every individual phenomena. Whatever exists has its own emptiness. So there's the emptiness of Sangye Kadro, there's the emptiness of Venerable Rinchen, there's the emptiness of Venerable Monlam, there's the emptiness of MG, there's the emptiness of this table, there's the emptiness of the gong. So each and every individual phenomena, whatever exists, has its own emptiness in the sense that that's its real nature, its true nature, the actual way that it exists. So there are individual emptinesses. That's hard. But anyway, those are the parts of emptiness. So emptiness also depends on its parts. And initially, when we first start getting an understanding of emptiness, we do so on the basis of individual phenomena. We start by, choosing one phenomena, and they usually say, use yourself. Use yourself as an example to understand emptiness, because that's very useful. If we can understand the emptiness of our big fat I, our ego, then that will really help to reduce our afflictions, self-centeredness and anger and so on and so forth. So it's very practical, very useful to get a sense of the emptiness of the I. But just because, even if we do that, if we manage to get understanding emptiness of our own I, we still have to look at other phenomena and understand how they are empty too. So just understanding the emptiness of this one doesn't mean you immediately understand the emptiness of other persons and phenomena. You still have to analyze though. But it's helpful. Once you get a good understanding of emptiness of one thing, then it's much easier to understand the emptiness of other things as well. And it said when you really develop your understanding of emptiness and it gets to the point of a direct perception, a direct realization of emptiness, then at that point in time, you do have the realization of the emptiness of everything that exists. Yeah. That's what we were talking yesterday, I think, about the Arya, somebody who's an Arya. So the term Arya refers to someone who has reached that level. They have the direct, non-conceptual realization of the emptiness of all phenomena. But initially, you only have that experience when you're in deep meditation, when you're, really meditating single-pointedly on emptiness. And they're not in that state all the time. So they, have to take a break and go and get a cup of tea or go to the bathroom or whatever. So when they come out of that state of meditation, single-pointedly realizing emptiness, then they're no longer able to have that experience, the, directly seeing the emptiness of everything. But their mind is still very much affected by that. They no longer see things the way they did before because they know better. They say things will still appear as if they exist inherently, independently, truly, but they don't buy into that. They know it's not true. And an example of that, well, we could use the example of the mirage. So let's say there's some tourists who go to the desert, and they're walking around, driving around, they see this thing on the horizon, they say, oh, look, there's a big lake over there, yeah? Let's go and go for a swim. And so they see the lake and they believe it's a lake and they're really excited about going to see that lake. But the local people, people who've been living there, there's no lake there. I mean, they might see the mirage, right? They probably see the mirage too, but they know it's just a mirage. They don't believe in it. They don't buy into that appearance and think there's a lake over there. They know better. So they're probably laughing. No, but yeah, so that's like the Aryas when they're not in meditation. They still see these illusory appearances of things as if they're inherently independently existing, but they know better. They know, they don't, that's not true. And they're compassionate. They're not laughing at sentient beings who are still buying into those, but they're compassionate because they know, oh, these poor sentient beings, they're still caught up in these illusions, these delusions, these, fantasies, and running after them or getting angry at them and fighting against them. And so they just have compassion and they just want to help sentient beings to wake up and see things as they are. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, so that's number 2, parts, that everything depends on parts. And then there's this third way that things are dependent, but this is really hard to understand. The first 2 aren't too difficult, but the third one is really hard, but still good to talk about it. And this is designation by thought and name to a basis of designation. And this applies to all things. So all things, both permanent and impermanent, depend on being designated. Sometimes they use the word labeled or imputed or named. But basically what it means is, like there's an example here. So if we take a car, take the example of a car, the car is really just a name, just a word, just a term given to this collection, this combination of different parts. The chassis, the wheels, the hubcaps, the engine, the windows, the doors, the seats, all many, many, many parts, probably thousands of parts put together in a factory. And then we call that a car. That's not too difficult to understand. But when we see a car, especially if it's a brand new, beautiful, shiny, luxury car, we get really excited. And it seems as if there's a car there, some kind of real car. Car isn't just a name given to a whole bunch of parts put together in a factory, but it's something real. Yeah, and if it's a car we are attracted to, excited about, we have attachment for, then that appearance feeds our attachment, our desire. And so the reality of the car and how we see the car are quite different. Yeah, the reality of the car is, all these parts. And none of the parts, the interesting thing is, none of those parts is a car. If you're asked, this is what Tibetan lamas would do. They'll say, okay, find the car. Where's the car? Point to the car. And we'll go up and put our finger on some part of the car. And they say, that's not a car, that's a door. That's not a car, that's a window. That's not a car, that's the hood. So whatever part we point to, we put our finger on, isn't a car, it's just a part. And we could say it's a non-car. If it's not a car, that means it's a non-car. Okay? A door is a non-car, a wheel is a non-car, a window is a non-car, a hood is a non-car, even the engine, that's probably the most important part, but that's not a car either, because if you just have an engine all by itself, you can't get in that and drive down the road, right? So none of the parts, there's all these parts, thousands of parts, and none of them is a car, meaning they're all non-cars. So where's the car? What can you point to as being this real car that you're so excited about, so attached to, you want so much? Or you think, my car, that's my car, don't touch my car. Yeah, so our mind, the way we see things is as if they are very real. And then we can have attachment, we can have possessiveness, we can have anger, aversion, based on this appearance of something very real. And normally people don't question, they just react emotionally and get all caught up and sometimes act out their afflictions and create negative karma, all on the basis of this kind of mistaken appearance of things. And it's not saying there isn't a car there. There is a car. Yes, there's all these parts put together, and it's very useful to get in, drive to town, pick up groceries, go to the doctor, whatever. Yeah, so we're not denying the existence of a car, but it's just, do we see the car correctly as it is? Or the way we see the car, yeah, our perception, our thoughts, our conception of the car, do they accord with reality, how the car really does exist? So that's the question. And so this third one is, we can get some understanding of it. Yeah, you put all these parts together and you call it a car. Yeah, that's easy to understand. But to really understand that, they actually say, we have to first realize emptiness. We have to get the realization of emptiness before we really understand that third one and see how, things do not exist independently, inherently from their own side, but they are merely designated or merely labeled through this process of mind, thinking, giving a name to some. The term basis of designation refers to the collection of parts, that collection of parts that make up the object. And so there's this collection of parts, then mind, conceptual mind, giving a name to that, and that's how things exist. That's their actual mode of existence on the conventional level. Sometimes it can sound kind of easy, but they say to really understand that we first have to recognize how we do see things in a mistaken way, and then investigate that. Am I seeing things correctly? The way I see things, is it true? And go through a process of refuting, realizing the falseness of our normal perception of things. So that just gives a little understanding, a little idea of dependent, what's called dependent arising, which is sometimes called the king of reasons, although a more gender neutral term would be monarch. That's what Jeffrey Hopkins used. Monarch of reasons, the best reason to get to an understanding of emptiness. So we'll come to the end of this session. We'll continue in the afternoon.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Vajrasattva, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever.